Let's dive in. It's a hyperbaric living podcast. So we're talking about hyperbaric chambers, hyperbaric therapy, hyperbaric medicine advancements, but we also talk about the fact that hyperbaric therapy works really well when it's used in integration with other therapies. And fasting is a therapy. It's free. It's a lifestyle change, but it is a therapy. So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that it's a therapy, because, as I've been out in the world really trying to empower people to take this as a healing tool, we still have a lot of people that believe fasting is for weight loss. It's a diet, it's a fad. And it's not. It's a therapy, and it's a healing state that you put your body in. And the only way you can get into this healing state is through the absence of food. So what's really cool, and Dr.Masha and I have geeked out on this before, is that when you look at a therapy like hyperbarics and you look at, okay, what it's doing at the neuron level, yes, it's driving oxygen into neurons, driving oxygen into cells. Now, if you stack that with the presence of ketones, where the body is making ketones, you now have two healing fuel sources going into the brain specifically at the same time. So that there's an amplification of the results that can happen with a chamber if you are in this ketogenic or what I call fat burning state. And the only way, or the best way, I should say, to get to that state is through fasting.
And how many hours of fasting are we looking at to get into ketogenic state?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically we say somewhere between 13 to 15 hours of where your blood sugar is continually dropping, because your body has to make this switch over, this metabolic switch over into the fat burning. And the only way it can know to do that is the blood sugar has to drop. So it doesn't have to be a 72-hour fast, although I know a lot of people that go into the chamber when they're on those longer fasts. But in general, what you want it to be in a fasted state to make ketones, it takes somewhere between 13 to 15 hours.
And why is it important to be in ketosis when you're using a chamber, or why is it beneficial?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I will look at it as from two angles. One is you just want to amplify your results in the chamber. And so the brain has two fuel sources. One is obviously blood sugar, glucose when we eat, and one is ketones. So when we're in this fat burning state, when we are in the brain is gobbling up ketones, it is more receptive to healing. So it is more receptive to nutrients like red light and oxygen and even your supplements. It's ketones, you got to look at them as an amplification of the healing state. So it would make the most sense to go in with that, your brain operating primarily from that fuel source to maximize the healing that can happen in a chamber. Now, on the second way to look at this, and this is what Masha feels strongly about, and I'd love to circle back with her around this at some time, and maybe you talked about this, is she absolutely feels that if you go into the chamber after you've eaten a big meal, that you're actually going to oxidize cells in a quicker way, which is not a good thing. So the example she used with me is that if you eat an apple, you take a bite out of an apple and you leave it out on the countertop overnight, or even in a couple hours, it starts to get brown in the presence of oxygen. So she strongly feels that we should all be going into the chamber, at least this was as of a couple of years ago, she may have modified this, but that we should be going into the chamber in a healing state, in a fasted state, because you want glucose to be low, ketones to be high, so you're creating the right healing environment.
I sort of agree with that. I also think that what we do when we go into a chamber after we've eaten a big meal, we're driving angiogenesis, which we don't want, especially in cancer. And I don't know if that's more important or less, but I'm thinking with ketones, do people automatically go in ketosis when they fasted for 13 to 15 hours?
Not always. And so you could actually, to your point, you could actually use it as a tool. So the research that I've seen on hyperbarics and metabolic syndrome is that we can actually look at using oxygen as a way to bring blood sugar down. So if you're struggling to get into ketosis, but you haven't eaten, let's say, in 14 hours, 15 hours, and you're not making ketones, get in the chamber, because it does help with insulin sensitivity. It does help with blood sugar regulation. It's also going to support, some of the key organs like the liver, that you need a healthy liver to be able to get into a state of ketosis. So it could be that tool to help you switch into ketosis deeper, definitely.
What about taking exogenous ketones before going into a chamber?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, Masha and I chatted about that. Now, here's the complicating factor that I want everybody to think through. Like, if you really, truly want to supercharge your brain and body, you would be fasted. So let's say 13 hours, and then you would take exogenous ketones, and then you would get in the chamber. Like, you come out like a superhuman. So I love that as a hack. Where exogenous ketones go wrong is that you're creating an imbalanced environment in the body. If you eat a meal, blood sugar is high, and then you put ketones in. And this is highly debated in the ketogenic world. So you're going to find experts on both sides of this conversation. But my general feeling is that it's not normal when blood sugar is elevating post-meal for ketones to come in, because ketones are a byproduct of blood sugar going down. So now you've created an unnatural environment in there, and I'm not sure that's going to be in your best interest.
Yeah, I agree, because it's not natural. But maybe people are doing that so they can sort of cheat with eating that meal and then.
For sure. So there's another way. I mean, again, this is why it may sound confusing, but we have to look at it as, what tool are we pulling out that day? And of course, it's like you're going in your chamber, but you can look at ketones and eating to your, how do you want to use the chamber to amplify a state? So with, let's say you have trouble regulating blood sugar, and you're finding that you're struggling to lose weight. The research, lots of research that I've seen, is showing that it brings blood sugar down. And I've done this in my clinic. I've done this on myself, where we will take a blood sugar reading. We will put somebody in the chamber. When they come out after that reading, absolutely 10 points, sometimes greater dip in blood sugar. So it can be used for those that are struggling to bring those blood sugar levels down.
And to extrapolate further, so what happens after a person gets out of the chamber? They're in ketosis, they've just received all this oxygen. Do they continue fasting for a certain amount of time, or can they eat? What would be the best routine, health-wise?
Yes, this is a great question. So think of it as, this is why I call it metabolic switching. You've switched over, you're like a hybrid car now, you're using a different fuel source. So, but once you're in that ketogenic system, the longer you stay there, the more healing happens. So it's really up to you. If you're healing, like, let's use a concussion as an example. Ketones are healing for concussions. Oxygen is healing for concussions. So a really cool strategy would be, go in a fasted state, take some exogenous ketones to amplify that ketogenic state, get in the chamber. And then when you get out, now you have oxygen, you have ketones, you have healing going on in the brain. Stay there for another 4 to 5 hours if you can. Don't eat, so that your brain the healing will continue even though you're not in the chamber anymore. That's how you can really stack those two together.
And that will potentiate the effects of the hyperbaric therapy.
That's right.
It's and like maybe, you're out. Yeah, maybe the effects of fasting.
Still going. Yeah, and both. You're right. Because you're out of the chamber. But it leaves the question, and I'm sure you've had conversations like this on this podcast, but is the healing just happening in the chamber? When you get out, how does the healing stop? And I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that, but the way to keep it going is do it in a fasted state, because with the presence of ketones, everything is going to continue. The healing state will continue.
Well, thank you for explaining this, because it's a question that comes up a lot. It comes up every day. virtually on every conversation. And now we know this is what we do. If a person can only use hyperbaric chamber in the evening, let's say they have to travel to the clinic, various reasons, how many hours at least would you recommend after having a meal and getting into a chamber? They cannot go in a fasting state today.
Right, right. Such a good question. I would say 2 hours, because typically you want, when you eat a meal, you want your blood sugar to come back to that pre-meal amount within 2 hours. So give yourself 2 hours and then get in. And that's how you could hack that if evening was the only time you could do it.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask you a question about, or several questions about women's health, fasting, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy. How do this connect? How can we combine both fasting and hyperbarics for various women's health issues? Because we talked about it a little bit. Women are created a little or a lot differently than men. We have different hormonal makeup. How do we make sure that we benefit from both therapies as well?
That also is such a deep question. And thank you for asking it. Here's what we need to know as women is that we are hormonally driven. So it doesn't matter if you're in, perimenopause, menopause, or you're, 30 trying to get pregnant, like hormones run us. So when we break down specifically the sex hormones, it's really interesting because each one of these sex hormones has a different lifestyle that it likes. And that lifestyle actually can be really enhanced with hyperbarics. So let me explain the two biggest ones. We've got estrogen, and estrogen really wants glucose and insulin to be low. So it's great if you're fasting, if you need to balance estrogen or try to bring estrogen up to your age appropriate levels. If you go in a fasted state and glucose is low, and then you bring oxygen in, it takes glucose down even more. You're even deeper into ketosis. That's phenomenal for estrogen production. Now, progesterone, it likes glucose high. And what really diminishes and damages progesterone is cortisol. Well, we know when you go into the chamber, you're putting yourself in a parasympathetic state. And we know based off of science that it brings cortisol levels down. So now, again, we're driving a car. What gear are we putting this in? We could do a hormone test and we could say, okay, gosh, I'm low in progesterone. So I need to make sure that I'm using the hyperbaric however many times a week to really handle my cortisol levels. Whereas you could say I'm low in estrogen, and now I need to use the chamber as a way to deepen my ketogenic state, like we just talked about. So we start to see, and if you put that together in a cycle, the estrogen's coming in the first half of our cycle, progesterone's coming in the back half. So you could actually tailor like a treatment plan. If you knew a woman needed to balance estrogen, all her chamber therapies should be in that follicular phase in the front half. If she needed to balance progesterone, let's stack her chambers in the luteal phase in that back half phase. And now we're being really smart about how we use this tool.
Wow, I love this conversation. This is absolutely brilliant. I wish I knew this 10, 15 years ago.
I know, right? Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
And you could do the same with the postmenopausal women, like hot flashes. 80% of menopausal women have hot flashes, and it's a really stressful thing. Well, hot flashes is low estrogen. It's when estrogen dips. Okay, so now let's get you, build you like, and there's a lot of ways you could hack this, but let's again look at what estrogen needs. So let's go in a fasted state. Let's add in those ketones for that woman with a hot flash, and let's get her doing it a couple of times a week, if not more, to help with balancing estrogen. So you can take each symptom and like create a protocol around it based off of what hormone a woman's trying to drive.
And then in perimenopause, we can emphasize that progesterone deficiency that women are starting to have first.
Yes. Yeah. Which is really interesting if you think about perimenopause, because you still have a cycle. So then really go in the week before your cycle, even if you haven't had a cycle in 60 days. But then what a lot of women in perimenopause experience is clotting, heavy periods. That's a loss of progesterone. So now let's really, the week before your period, let's really intensely use the chamber as a way to navigate that bumpy time, because that is a bumpy time for perimenopausal women, is right before their cycle is about to start.
And let me see if I understood this correctly. So if we're trying to emphasize progesterone, then we're probably better off not to use a hyperbaric chamber in a fasted state in the second half of the cycle, but
That's right. Yeah, it would be because you're not looking for it to be in a ketogenic state. That's a really good nuance you caught. You could go that one, okay, because progesterone wants glucose to be high. So you could go into the chamber if your focus is progesterone after you have eaten. And that would be, and then again, we'd want to time it to the cycle if you still had a cycle.
Wow, amazing. I have so many thoughts in my mind right now. I'm thinking about women with endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome, where they have this relative excess of estrogen, and whether we can balance it further with just the right timing of the hyperbaric session.
It's the timing, right? This is the thing that I've been noticing as I've been teaching fasting to the world, is that every biohacking tool, from red light therapy to cold plunges to hyperbarics to fasting to all the cutting edge diets that are coming out, for women, they need to be timed to the cycle. If you're a cycling woman, you want to get to know that. If you're a postmenopausal woman, one thing we've been doing, if women in my community, is we map it to the moon even. Because most women will ovulate at a full moon their whole life, or a lot of women will. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole of information to go down. But it's all about us understanding our hormonal profile and then matching these biohacks to that. With PCOS, I want to point something out that's really profound, and you've probably seen this just in your community. There are two issues that are affecting PCOS: insulin resistance. We already talked about how you could use the chamber to overcome that. And that would be, do it in the first 10 days of your cycle. I'd be in that chamber as much as you could. But the other issue for PCOS is toxicity. And when we look at the parts of the brain that are controlling hormones, the hypothalamus and pituitary, they really get beaten up by toxins because they have no blood-brain barrier. So our environmental toxins that like phthalates and BPA, plastics, all the endocrine disruptors really gum up that part of the brain that is so necessary for control of our hormones. So just the act of going in the chamber at any point of your schedule, of your menstrual cycle, is going to be therapeutic for helping detox you.
And since we've touched upon that, can we talk a little bit about insulin sensitivity and how it improves both with fasting and hyperbaric therapy?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if you look at the metabolic challenge we have in the world right now, it's because people are insulin resistant. So this is why fasting is caught on like wildfire, because you've got so many people that are finally given a tool that help them overcome insulin resistance without having to take medication. Well, again, a theme of this podcast has been, we also know that hyperbarics improves insulin sensitivity and can be used as a tool to open up the receptor sites for insulin, to create new receptor sites, as some of the research we've seen. So you're now, fasting and hyperbarics really become this incredible tool that can change metabolic health without having a person change food. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because I'm not telling you to go eat bad food, but we have a food addicted world, and overcoming food addiction is really, really challenging. So we can use fasting and hyperbarics to start to manage insulin and glucose and bring that sensitivity back. And in that, we are going to see behavior changes around food addiction. So it becomes like this feedback loop, and not even to mention the changes that happen in the microbiome, and the microbiome really controls your cravings. So we've now got the hyperbarics changing the microbiome. We've got fasting changing the microbiome. And now we're taking it from like a reverse angle. We're not shaming the person saying, stop eating that. we're saying, let's try a different path here and see if we can change your body so the cravings change. And then you naturally want to change what you eat.
Absolutely. And insulin resistance creates cravings.
That's right.
Partially where cravings come from, partially from microbiome and, brain and everything else. But insulin resistance, wow, great. Perfect. Thank you. That really explains it. And this is not gender specific.
No, that would not be gender specific at all. In fact, fasting alone, I have an incredible story of a man who came to me who was 300 pounds and he wanted to lose weight. And he told me that he was food addicted and he was drinking 12 sodas a day. So and that's why he's failed at every diet, is he can't overturn his food addiction. So all I did is take every toxic food he was eating and I trained him how to compress it into an 8-hour eating window over 3 months. And he was still drinking his sodas, eating his buffalo wings, like still eating all the bad food. He just had to eat it in an 8-hour window. Within 3 months, he had lost 40 pounds eating that food. So I didn't have a chamber for him. If I'd add the chamber in there, it could have been a whole different thing. But yeah.
Or it would have had an added benefit.
That's right.
But he was still able to lose that 40 pounds, and that's remarkable. And that probably decreased his cravings, right?
That's right. That's right.
And everything else. You're a very busy person. Everybody knows that. I'm amazed at the amount of content that you put out there and educating people. I watch your videos on YouTube, both on Instagram. I have your book. And I know that now you are working on a special event that's going to take place in California, right? Can you?
Yep. Yeah. So I've fallen so in love with hyperbarics, and I've seen it work miracles in places that I couldn't, with patients, figure out how to get a healing state to happen. And so we really want to raise money for women who might not be able to afford this chamber, where we could get a chamber into her house for maybe a couple of months, have her do a mega dose, or children who maybe the family can't afford it. So I came up with this idea, and Shannon took it and loved it, of gathering women to talk about what does it take to put a health plan together for a woman, much like the nuance we had in this conversation. What does it take to what pieces? How do you know which one of these pieces to pull together? So I brought 3 health professionals together: a woman who specializes in hyperbarics, and Dr. Melissa Saunders, and then Dr. Sonia Jensen specializes in trauma and hormones. And then we have a fitness trainer, Carolyn Pierce, who specializes in fitness for women. And then I will be interviewing LeAnn Rimes. I've been working with LeAnn for the last year. We have done every freaking tool you can think of: supplements, detox, diet changes, like you name it. LeAnn and I have a joke that she's done all the things. And once I put a chamber into her house, and with IHA's help, everything changed about her health. Like, it was a game changer. Every tool I was using, every supplement, every diet, like, just amplified. And the woman healed, like, in a matter of 4 weeks. I saw a dramatic change in her mental state primarily. Right? It was like her moods changed. It was like everything started working better. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to interview LeAnn, and we're going to talk about how did we approach her health? How do we integrate hyperbarics? And then how do other women do the same? And so it's going to be a just cool conversation with some amazing women, and we'd love for people to join.
And it's going to be on February 24th, right?
Yeah, February 24th. Yeah.
People can purchase tickets to be present at the event. Is it going to be online as well, or?
Yeah, for right now, it's in person. We're working to see if we can get live stream. So stay tuned. You can go to womenoftheheart.org. And also you can follow IHA and myself on Instagram and Facebook, because we'll be, if we go live stream, we'll let you know. But also you can buy tickets. You'll see a lot of promo there. So womenoftheheart.org, and you can get a ticket. And the fact that the world is hugging again, I'm like, let's just get everybody together and hug.
And be normal again.
Yeah, and be normal. So it's going to be, and it's a really, we can only hold like a couple hundred people. So it's a really intimate event. So you're going to get it's going to be special. I don't know if any events brought like a megastar like LeAnn to the public in such an intimate way. And she has quite a story to share.
And all of you guys, your stars as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll have all the links in the podcast description. So if you guys want to, if you can be there in person, amazing. If not, maybe it will be available online, right?
I think I can tell you right now, we're working really hard to see if we can live stream it. So, so stay tuned, follow the IHA, and you'll see if and maybe by the time this podcast comes out, so we'll have a note in the a section in the notes. So,
absolutely. I want to go back to LeAnn's story. You know what? It was interesting when you said that you worked with her for a year and you've almost prepared her body for this hyperbaric experience. Had she tried hyperbaric chamber, this is my personal opinion. I don't know her story, but this is what I've seen in my practice. When we start with hyperbaric therapy, yes, we can get some results. And as you said, it could be helpful with to jumpstart weight loss and help people with insulin resistance and such. But a lot of times, if we don't change other things, lifestyle modifications, supplements, introduce fasting, red light therapy, there could be many things. Prepare the body to get into. What's your opinion on that?
Oh, yeah. So it's funny because Dr. Jason Saunders and I have had this exact discussion because I have been coaching women back to health for a very long time, very, very sick women, and sicker than, the challenges that LeAnn had. And I have never seen hyperbarics work so well for somebody so quickly. And I think there were two things that LeAnn did. And I think the first is she did prepare the body. We had already gotten a lot of toxins out. We had already done so much work. So by the time the chamber got to her house, after 6 months of preparing it, her brain was just ready to absorb all that oxygen. And then the second piece is she did, and I don't know your feeling on this. We told her, she's a type A personality. We told her 40 hours in as short a period of time as you can. That woman got in the chamber every day, sometimes twice a day. She was calculating it all. I think she's over 100 hours for sure by now. But we did start to see the 40-hour mark. There was a dramatic change. Science also shows the 70-hour mark saw another level of change. So, and then the 100-hour is another level that we've seen. So it's been really fun to see it map out, but all the prep work really happened. Now, Jason believes that you can do it either way. He says that you look at hyperbarics as an amplification of whatever treatment plan you're in. And I don't know because we didn't do it with her early on, but I can tell you I'd never seen such a dramatic change in somebody's healing journey so quickly as I did with LeAnn when we got that chamber in her house.
I can only share my experience because what I used to do, I used to start with hyperbaric therapy because I was thinking that would give a person some hope so they can see the results and they will continue with, because natural therapy, it takes time and a lot of patience.
Yeah, it does.
But lately, what I've been doing, I'm trying to make sure that people are at least 50% better. Yeah. And then unless it's a difficult stage 4 cancer type of thing where we can't wait.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting is that I heard this phrase the other day that we don't need motivation on our healing journey. We need momentum. And it's the momentum that gives us motivation. So if somebody is needing that tool and that momentum early on, then yes, getting in the chamber may start to give them some momentum. But I've also seen it go the opposite, where people don't feel the results of the chamber because they have a high toxic load or because they have a lot of insulin resistance. So then you kind of set the modality up for failure because the patient doesn't see that it's as beneficial as they could see if they had been detoxing, if they'd already been insulin sensitive before they went into the chamber. You know what I mean?
I think for the first time, I've heard it from the doctors who are treating children on autistic spectrum. And they were telling me that they used to introduce hyperbarics right at the beginning, but they don't do it anymore because parents don't see results and they get very frustrated.
Yes.
But I was thinking maybe it's brain health, maybe it's very specific to autistic spectrum, but more and more, and it's very interesting that you brought up this too. Right, it will be interesting to have this conversation in a couple of years from now and see.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I hope all the listeners play with the tool, see how it works, because what we've gone through here is, do you do it fasted? Do you do it eating? Do you do it around your cycle? What point of the treatment journey? I mean, these are all questions that we are all going to have to, map out and answer for ourselves. But the more collective information we get, then we can start to come up with some protocols around it. My next book that I'm working on is about the female brain and what happens to the brain as a woman goes through menopause, and what resources do we have to be able to help her navigate that loss of hormones. And oxygen is one of them. And so, again, I think the more we get this tool out and we have people experimenting with it, we need to get feedback so we can start to come up with some very clear formulas for people to follow.
Interesting. Wow. Great conversation. I want to ask you another question. This is about supplements. So, for example, if somebody is taking supplements to go with their hyperbaric treatment, and they're doing it in a fasted state, do supplements break the fast, or it depends on a supplement?
It depends on the supplement, and it depends on the microbiome of the person. So you remember, our microbiomes are individual to us, and they will control your blood sugar levels. So there's not one absolute, but what I would say is, for most people, supplements won't break a fast. It's just a matter of if you can take it on an empty stomach. And some people, like B vitamins, are hard to take on empty stomachs sometimes.
Yeah, then they can.
But I'll tell you one thing that I do is I have some microbiome supplements that I love. I actually take them before I get in the chamber. Again, looking at the chamber is amplifying anything that I put into my body.
Wow. Oh, that great advice. I'm going to try this next time. Tomorrow, I'm going into the chamber tomorrow. I try to do it every day lately. What if a person is wearing a glucose monitor? So they can see more or less in real time how their glucose levels are changing. What change do we consider it to be breaking a fast?
I always say, if it raises it 5 to 10 points in milligrams to deciliters, then it's pulled you out of a fasted state. So I like to keep it under 5. Other experts say 10. So I'd have to do the conversion on that.
But if stress raises your glucose, can it pull you out of a fasted state too then?
Yeah, but it's different. The mechanisms are a little different, because when you have stress, the body releases stored sugar. And for whatever reason, the stored sugar doesn't seem to affect ketosis as deeply. Whereas if you're taking a cup of coffee or a supplement, or you're trying to fat bomb in that fasted state, that's an exogenous. It's not coming from within. So the liver seems, from my experience, to calculate that differently.
Well, I'm gonna follow all of your advice tomorrow.
Awesome.
I'm gonna do work for my estrogen, take exogenous ketones. I'll take my probiotic supplement. Thank you for all this wonderful, amazing advice. This is what we all need, because we're all learning, basically.
Yes,
we need to,
that's right.
For listeners, you need to understand, and we understand it too. This therapy, as it is, as the way we're using it now, is maybe 30 years old.
Yeah,
yes, it's 300 years old, but we were using it for completely different indications.
Yes, well said.
We're learning in a fast-paced, but still, it's a learning process. Dr. Mindy, thank you. It's such a pleasure to have you talk to you. I would pick your brain for the rest of the day, but I know that.
Well, I'll be at the IHA conference in June. So
I'll be there.
Each other, and we can sit down and
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, if you like this episode, please share it with a friend or family or whoever might benefit from this information. And otherwise, I'll see you next week.